Hello and welcome back, and it's time for another review, and today we want to look at a PoE switch from the brand known as EnGenius. It's one of two products that they've sent me to review here on the channel. We have this and a Wi-Fi 6 mesh router that we're going to talk about in another video if not already published, but today we're going to look at this switch. We're going to talk about things we like, we're going to talk about things we don't like, and we're definitely going to have a look at the software because frankly the hardware on this device is, although it's good, it's not exactly going to take your breath away, but it's the software that really stands out in our testing. And for now, what we're going to do is start the first half of this video talking about the hardware, and then we're really going to dig deep into the software because I think that is where this device truly shines. Now, if you're looking for it, the model ID is an incredibly boring name. It's the ECS1008P, and yes, I looked at my notes, I'm only human. But this is an 8-port PoE layer 2 switch. It's got management functionality inside as you would expect as a layer 2, and it has a modest power output. But when it really stands out is the fact that you can access it remotely with relative ease. A lot of the switches we've talked about here on the channel, particularly ones from Netgear, but definitely some of the other ones that we've seen arriving more and more from QNAP, who have really reinvested in that kind of technology. A lot of their solutions, the software is the breaker, because when it comes to Netgear, their software is still incredibly clunky, and QNAP, although their software is a great deal easier to use, it has to be said that remote access isn't as easy as it might be, and this system seems to say that it can solve both of those quite easily. It's also fanless and a silent switch as well, and we'll give you some idea of that later in the video, but for now, let's talk about this. It knocks around for about 150 nika, so it's $150 I should say for you guys. So again, it is an 8-port switch and it is a PoE managed switch, which 150 is $150, that's about right, I think. You can get cheaper ones out there, but they will have pretty awful Windows 98 looking software in the background that, although it does things like loop detection and lag and stuff like that, it's pretty limited and less reliable than you might like. So let's have a look. Again, pretty boring box. This is kind of an SMB class product. I think home users and prosumers, they're integrating cameras into their home or business environment. Chances are they will look at a switch like this. But again, at that sort of price level, I'd expect a little bit more business class stuff going on in the background. So we've got our quick start installation guide, and again, it's a paper manual, but of course all of this is available pretty easily online. It is a mini switch. So again, you're not really going to be looking at rack mount implementation of this device. Get this out of the packaging again. Have a look. There's the switch, quite light, nice and easy there. It's metal all the way around. And again, this doesn't have a fan inside. It's silent operation, so it does work on a system of heat sinks. Now, just to give you some idea about silent operation, I'm well aware this is a bigger switch. This is an 8-port 10 GBE switch. So this is a gigabit LAN switch, so 1 GBE. But this is a Netgear 10 GBE switch. But what I will say is even if this was 1 GBE or a combo, I've used a lot of Netgear switches and generally they arrive with fans. This is the difference, because this is what this system sounds like powering on. You hear that noise? That is the fans there in the background. That is the noise that's going to be there in the background of your room. And definitely when things get busier, that noise is going to ramp up with those fans. And again, I'm well aware this is a 10 GBE switch, so the bandwidth and the bandwidth switching is going to be a lot busier, but still nonetheless, that is what a switch with a fan inside sounds like. Remove that power there. Now, I mentioned about this being a silent switch as well. It's worth highlighting that part of the reason that is silent is because of the power delivery on this. Now, even though it's PoE, I will say that it seems a little on the modest side. It's a 55 watt PoE switch, which isn't exactly loads across 8 ports there. I mean, again, when I looked at the Wi-Fi 6 router that this brand makes, the ECW202, that has a power draw of, I think, around between 12 and 18 watts. So that's quite a lot of power delivery for that one device on a switch that only has 55 to play with. If you spend a little bit more, closer to $200, you can get PoE switches that can ramp up a little bit more, 85, maybe even 100 plus watts. So 55 watts seems a little tight for this switch, just a little bit there, but it does have a great deal of switching capacity inside, 16 gigabit switching capacity internally, which again, it means double for each of those gigabit LANs, which is definitely going to be useful. And I've mentioned about the cloud access as well, and network access. I won't include the setup during the course of this video, but what I will say is the user interface of this is a great deal more modern than pretty much everything I've seen out there. It's got a little bit of WordPress, but definitely a lot more analytical information out there for a number of you. Again, on the front there, we've got the usual sort of switches between enabling or disabling LEDs there, and even the power connector on the rear. It's your standard click-clock switch there. If we go further inside the box, we find our external mains power, and again, standard external power brick on this. So again, that's another way in which they've made that saving there in the background in terms of noise when the device is in operation. It utilises heat sinks, so don't worry too much about noise generation when it's in operation. But for now, what we should do is get this device powered up for you and take a good look at that software. Let's jump over to the screen. So here we are on the user interface of our EnGenius switch, the ECS1008P. Now, straight away, it's worth highlighting that the majority of going through the software on this device, I am going to use the online portal, cloud.engenius.ai. It's worth highlighting that you can tap into this switch locally, taking advantage of the IP. Unfortunately, if you do enable cloud services, it does then limit almost exclusively access to the cloud system, whether that's because it wants to make sure that the information it gives you is as accurate as possible, or to centralize the control. It has to be said that if you want to take advantage of the cloud services, it largely kills any network access to the switch, which is a real shame. And I think a lot of users will like the idea of tapping into a switch on the local area, you know, the 192 Ethernet connectivity on the LAN, rather than going through just the internet portal. Now, I do have the Wi-Fi 6 AP from EnGenius that I'm going to be doing a video on very shortly. This gives you some idea of what the local access point looks like. Something you can do here, this is kind of what you see here with that Wi-Fi 6 point. So, as I mentioned, EnGenius does allow local access, but the minute you connect one of these devices to the cloud services, it removes pretty much all of that connectivity with some light network diagnostic tools that you can access. But for now, let's focus directly on this cloud access point, because I've got to say, I've tested a lot of switches in the past, as mentioned earlier on in the video, and I really, really like this software. I'm just going to close that because that circle is driving me nuts. Now, as you can see, I've already created a bit more of a network, and I've got a switch here, and I have connected 8 devices to this switch. 4 of them are PoE. I've also got a PoE Wi-Fi 6 point I'm going to cover in another video, but lightly touch on here. And I've got a couple of clients connected. Now, to let you know that everything I'm doing today is on the cloud, I've made sure that I am utilizing a different network to the switch. Down there is the EnGenius Wi-Fi, and right now I'm using a different router to make sure that everything you're seeing here is showing remote access to this device. Now, you can see there the health chart there at the top left. It gives you some information about clients that are connected, what bandwidth they're using, and more. If you have multiple switches, because this is a business class product, they will all be listed here. And as you add more and more switches to the network, there's an icon down here with inventory and licenses. And as you buy more EnGenius products, you get the serial number, you enter the serial number here, or scan the 3D barcode on the back, and then you can add these items to your inventory and then apply them to different areas on site. So this switch here, I've applied to the one network I've got right now, but I can create other networks if I choose, if I've created other sub-networks within EnGenius. And that's something that really, this is when you're stepping into SD-WAN territory. So let's go back to that dashboard there, and again, we are focusing on the switch in today's video. But before we go into that switch, it's worth looking at the software, just the amount of analytical information it gives you. Everything from the websites you visit, you can see there some of the services that have been utilized on the stuff that I've connected. Also, at the same time, the operating systems that are connected to it. I'm utilizing 2 Android phones connected to this. I'm not using any of the Windows LAN, as mentioned earlier on, because I'm using a separate Wi-Fi network. And again, this can be broken down quite significantly in terms of the data traffic and the device traffic all the way through. Obviously, because I'm only listing this by days of connectivity, the result is going to be that I've only had this running for about a day and a half to get some information for this video. But normally this graph would be full of the different kinds of information and the devices. And indeed, you can go all the way down and get a report generated. This is a very cool feature that I really, really liked. That you can go ahead and create a new report. So, say for example, we want to create a new task. So this is a task where a report will be generated. So we can go for create a new report. Here we go. Let's go for generate that report. I've already generated this report. I can bin this if we choose. This is generating a report, and these reports are produced in a PDF form, and they're completely customizable. I'll go through it in just a moment, and this is something I think a lot of business users are really, really going to enjoy, having a network report that's issued at whatever time frame you want, that tells you what devices on the network you have, what their health and status, did they go up, did they go down, the traffic that was utilized through each of them, through each report, the different clients, all the devices across their network. All of that information is presented as a PDF report that will be emailed to you regularly. So to give you some idea of how easy that's generated, if I delete that task there, I can create a brand new report. So there's some of the reports that it's generating now. So if we create a new one, we give it a design. So we can go for that image there. We can give it a title. Call this one Robbie Test. And again, get rid of that special. We can give it an author. Just say me. Maybe I could spell that right. Sorry, the microphone's in my way. Add it your own company logo if you choose. You can just chuck in anything there if you choose. So if we go, we'll just chuck my face as the logo for the hell of it. From there, we can then click next. From there, you can say what areas you want covered. So let's say we want everything covered. If we've added a floor plan, if we're using Google Maps for geolocational data, we can add all that. Click next. We can say which one of our networks we want to cover if we've created multiple. How often do we want this to be generated? What area of time do we want covered throughout this? Then we add email addresses here and then add some text summary. So again, I added the word test, but we could say this is a report. And then from there, click next. And there you go. This is going to be the whole report. Click apply. And then it will generate this report for us at the frequency we choose, which will give us more information about the network. And again, we can see Robbie Test is now working in progress, and we'll come back to that later in the video. So again, going into the switch, we can go a little bit more into this information here. If we have multiple switches, they'd be listed here. We can go into it, and we can find out a little bit more information. Now, this is one of my early critiques, I would say, about this device, notwithstanding the fact that the cloud portal limits your access on the local LAN. I don't quite like that feature, if I'm totally honest. I don't like the fact that the cloud will stop me going in via the local area network to a meaningful degree. But my other critique is when I look at the switcher, I know this is a quick window of information, the amount of power being consumed by those PoE ports, the activity on each of them, what they're consuming, what their network bandwidth is. Obviously, this is not a 10G switch. But what I don't like is I've got to go one step further into details to get that really important information. So in this area, this is where I want to know how much traffic each port is using, which ports I need to assign priority of use, quality of service and priority of service. We can see a lot more information about the hardware that's being utilized there. And all of this information here, I mean, I love this, but I don't like, I've got to go a little bit further to have it. I'd kind of want more of this information, and definitely this area of control to be more readily available on that previous window. I think this is a very minor critique, if I'm honest, and obviously having this information here is still very, very useful indeed. It does also take a little bit longer than I would have liked to produce a lot of that background information. So if we have a look down here, we can look at some of these ports. As you can see, some of these ports are PoE activated. They are consuming power. So these are clearly the cameras. So if we go ahead and say port 1, let's give that a little bit more of a priority there. We can configure these ports and then say which ports we want to give a little bit more of a boost to. So we can go ahead and say settings for port 1. We can call this one camera 1. Give it a name. We can then say if we want to limit that potential performance, limit the power, or make sure it has priority over everything else. Say whether we want to create that virtual LAN. Of course, this system does have a whole provision built into it for voice LAN. That's when you have VoIP lines and stuff in your business. And again, that's where we're moving into that SD-WAN kind of territory there. And again, lots of quality of service where you want it to live in the priority structure, of course. It's all kind of built in there and stuff that you can enable and change over time. And it's very easy to configure them all the way along the line. So if we go into the VLAN there, we can go ahead and create a new virtual LAN if we choose. So we can give this one a virtual LAN. We have to give it an identification ID. So we'll give it VLAN 1. Have to give it a number actually, don't we? So we'll give that VLAN 2 and give it a name. So VLAN test. And then we can create this new virtual LAN, and within that virtual LAN we can assign some of those ports. So we can say we want ports 5, 6 and 7 for example. Now I'm not going to do that because we still need to go through some of the stuff that's connected. But what's handy there is that you're going to be able to create those sub-networks, and these sub-networks are still going to be accessible via this overall arching CMS system from EnGenius, which I quite like. So if we reset there and we come out of that there, we're not going to create or counter, we're just going to leave that VLAN there. And again, same goes, we can mirror some of those ports for failover. And again, the PoE scheduling, so we can decide when we want the power to be committed to individual ports and to what extent. So again, that camera on port 1, we can make sure that it has priority and the lion's sharing of that schedule overnight, because it might be a security camera in your business. That can all be set up pretty easily there. Link aggregation, for those that aren't aware, otherwise known as port trunking, is when you can aggregate ports together. So say we create an aggregation here where we want to do LACP, and we can say that we want to link aggregate ports. We can add those ports together and effectively combine their network bandwidth. You just have to make sure that the client device that these two are connected to is also link aggregation or port trunking enabled. Logs, of course, useful, but given this system has that lovely report-based structure there in the background, and again, we can go and get that report downloaded for us. We can go ahead and check that report out. So it's already done, and we can open up our brand new report. There's our logo up there. There's our information. And again, I do love this report thing. It's something I've not seen presented as a PDF that's emailed directly from the cloud system from many other platforms without charging a subscription service. And all of this is included in the cost of that. So again, that ticks a big old box for me there. And again, the topography, we can go ahead and look on the overall map. Obviously, the topography of my network here is incredibly light because I've only got the switch and the Wi-Fi 6 access point there. But it's still nice to be able to go in. We can go into those details there and find out more about it and go directly into the breakdown there, which is pretty cool. I don't like the system could be a tad more responsive if we were utilizing the LAN, as mentioned earlier on. I don't like that right now, because we're using the cloud service, we're getting a little bit more of a slowdown than I would like. And again, if we go back into the settings, we can look into the breakdown of connected clients on each of those networks. And again, there's not been that many pop-ups. This is one of the first pop-ups we've seen on the system. But you can see we've got a couple of Android devices connected via the Wi-Fi 6 access point, so not strictly the switch. And we'll probably cover this more soon. But again, you can find out more information about what these devices are doing there in the background and the sites they're going to if they have those settings open. So again, we've got more settings here that are kind of crossed between the switch and the Wi-Fi 6 access point. So if we go into the VLAN settings, and again, we've created that VLAN from earlier on, we can get a little bit more information on those, as well as configuring within their own dedicated window. The switch settings, this is the system and the protocol, and this is where we can play with a lot of the back-end network settings of our switch. So this is where a lot of those things we talked about earlier on, bandwidth control, ACL config controls, loop detection, virtual LAN control and creation, and IGMP snooping, that kind of stuff, alongside flow control is all configurable here, and I kind of miss all that lovely graphical user interface stuff from earlier, but at least all of these options are here. And even if you're going to be utilizing a separate voice or VoIP related land area network, it's nice that you can play around with the settings and add preset phone VoIP setups that will optimize those phone lines, and then of course give you a preset configuration for quality of service on those VoIP lines, because let's face it, in most businesses these days that utilize voice over IP, VoIP is priority because that's your customers. And again, lots of the mini settings again, like IGMP snooping and of course jumbo frames to increase the MTU. That's more applicable, I would say, to your 10 GBE networks, but it's nice to see that option configurable nevertheless. And again, not a lot of nice, easy options to play along with. And then you've got your general settings there for the switch itself. We can see lots of information there about the login credentials as well. And again, those local credentials as well to access the switch. They're still a little limiting. I kind of wish that we could see a little bit more in terms of configuration and access for the local. And again, that's probably my biggest complaint about this. If we go for access control there, this is where you add your priority users or block users that have tried to get into your network erroneously. EnSky is kind of their premium service that's added in. It's part of, if we go into those settings there, for the kind of higher business tier stuff. But I do think you've got enough go along with here on even the default tier level. And also adding users, sub admins, just even lower tier users is actually really, really straightforward. You can even assign them to individual networks if you choose. You don't even have to give them any kind of high-end access to everything. You can go ahead and just give them low-level access if you choose. Apart from that, I think that's really everything I can show you about this software within this degree. I do think with regards to connectivity and the user interface, this is one of the best switch user interfaces I've seen. Again, I'm going to keep bringing it up. I don't like the more limited local access on 192. And again, you can enable some of those higher end layer 2 switch capabilities if you choose quite easily. There's little things with the user interface that are more to do with customization, like switching out light and dark for night mode and day mode. And again, you've got your account control enabling two-step authentication. All of these are kind of more linked more generally to the EnGenius cloud service than they are to the individual devices. But they do have a nice tour function there that will talk you through a lot of the features and functionality of the system, that will talk you through how it works. I will stop misclicking there. You can sort of learn more about the whole thing. It will guide you through the whole process pretty straightforwardly to allow you to look through a lot of the features and functionality of your device. And of course, alerts on when it's going to tell you while devices have got new firmware updates regularly, which you can choose to be installed automatically or manually. And as you go through that, as you can see while I was going through this, I was testing the network, disconnecting devices, reconnecting the whole switch just to see how it would behave. And it was pretty responsive overall. So what do I think? I do think this switch is a little pricey for an 8 gig PoE switch, maybe $20 to $30, $40 too high for a home or prosumer user, but I would say for a business user, this is very, very much up my strata. And I think a lot of business users that have either experience of SD-WAN or experience of a multi-site environment will see huge advantages in this service, alongside a lot of integration with EnGenius themselves, who kind of help users a lot along the way. Help guides there at the bottom right of the screen are always going to be handy, but mainly the alerts I find quite useful. The idea that if you do need EnGenius to kind of step in and take care of things or help you out, they are available. This is kind of not just hardware they've got here. This is very much a service solution. And I think if you're a home user, you're almost certainly not going to take advantage of a lot of these things. But a business user will definitely enjoy the kind of IT support elements that this brings to the table. And I think on that score, it's very hard to fault them with the amount of information they're giving you, those reports that you can generate for your business, and of course, that extra tier of support that the system's providing there in the background. But let me know what you guys think. Have you enjoyed this review? Let me know in the comments if you have. I do like looking at these switches, and this is definitely a step outside of the usual thing, so it's nice to take a look at it. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, click like. If you want to learn more, click subscribe. And if you are looking for free, impartial advice, genuinely free advice on your network setup or data storage solution, take advantage of the free data storage network attached storage Thunderbolt, all of it, support in the free advice section below at NAS Compares. There's a link in the description. It'll take you through to there where it's manned by two people, myself and Eddie the web guy. We give free advice there, costs you nothing. It might take us an extra day or two to answer you because we are humans. We do have lives. We will answer every single email. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.